The Queen and Ransom. So many leaders, so much to say. Clearly, one of the key ideas that exists is leadership. But rather than just pointing out that it exists, we need to be able to explore it in further depth and further detail and really get to some comparisons. And so today I'm going to take you through a practice paragraph, a sample paragraph that I've written for you that can help you get to some further ideas about leadership and some other things that might exist, but also to show you some ways to go about structuring your comparative essays and your comparative paragraphs so that you're making sure that you're really getting to the point and really getting to analysis and comparison. Leadership is shown by both texts to be a position that holds great responsibility and expectation. The dynamic between a leader and their people is also examined as attitudes shift and loyalties are tested. And so you can see here that this paragraph is working to a point where it's not just looking at the fact that leadership exists between the two texts, but rather looking at an aspect of leadership, that the dynamic that exists between a leader and their people is an idea that is commonly shared by the Queen and Ransom. As he breaks daily every rule that he has taught his myrmidons, Achilles stretches the bonds of his men's loyalty and dedication. And you'll notice that I've dived straight in there. I haven't said throughout the text Ransom by David Malouf and everything like that because I've already covered that in the introduction. You don't need to waste time or waste space on your paragraph and in your writing by re-referring to text that we already know that you're talking about. So getting straight into that quote of breaks daily, as soon as you wrote that, the assessor knows exactly which text you're talking about and you're off. You want to be clearer and you want to be more direct in the way that you go about these things. However, such is their faith in him as a leader that they continue to obey and follow the orders that they have always followed. This can be seen in contrast to Queen Elizabeth, whose grasp on such power is weakened by the events that engulf the nation. And so, straight off the bat, we already have a comparison. I'm only 4 or 5 sentences into this paragraph, and already I've drawn a comparison between the leader in one and the leader in the other. Notice as well that I haven't used Priam for this example. I'm looking at a different type of leader. We don't always just have to deal with the two main characters being Elizabeth and Priam. And also look at the fact that it's jumped straight into that difference, with the contrast being that her power is weakened, whereas Achilles' power is never weakened because he has a different type of hold on the people that he leads. Her initial belief that no one would wear the idea of a republic, along with her bold stance in regards to how we do things in this country, is eventually tested until she is able to see that there's been a change. And so in the space of one sentence, I've been able to illustrate through 3 really great quotes how her understanding of the people that she leads works. You'll notice that and when I say works, I mean how it changes throughout the film. You'll notice that it all happens in one sentence. I'm not taking 4 or 5 sentences to almost explain the film to the assessor as if they haven't watched it before. You can jump straight into evidence like this because the most important part of your paragraph is not explaining the text, but rather getting to the really important analysis and therefore comparison. Thus, the texts differ in their examination of how far a group's loyalty can extend to their leader. And so I've got to that difference. I've been able to put an example of the Myrmidons and Achilles. I've been able to put an example of Queen Elizabeth, and I've been able to get to this point where I can say, thus. So looking at both of those things, the texts differ in this way, in which, how far a loyalty can be stretched. The Queen's struggle to understand her people's shift in values is further exemplified by her resistance to mourn with them. She incredulously comments that their grief does not take precedence over her grandchildren, exposing her conflict between her personal and public life and her struggle to be what her people expect of her in such an uncertain time. And so now we're twisting the idea a little bit further. We've already made one comparison and talked about one difference between the way that leaders operate in either of these texts. Now we're taking this idea further and talking about how our personal sides can be exposed in the battle for leaders and how they look at themselves in their society and the way that they lead people. Whilst Priam also rallies against what is expected of him in his grieving for his son, And I'm going to stop there just to show you that the way that this paragraph has been structured, or the way that this sentence that I've just read has been structured, is beginning with that word whilst, because it's saying that, okay, I've just been talking about Queen Elizabeth and, incredulously talking about her grief and the public's grief and showing her personal side. And this sentence has started with that, whilst Priam also rallies against it. So it's that way of, in a really subtle way, saying, whilst Priam is the same as Queen Elizabeth in this regard, and by the way that I've started that sentence, of course, I'm going to finish that sentence by saying he differs in, and I'm going to go off in another way. And so whilst is such an effective word for that reason, because it just subtly shows that we can talk about whilst these two things are the same in this regard, it's going to go off in another direction and talk about them in another way. And so if you're not using that term yet, that could be something that you could use just to shift your analysis and your comparison up that little bit in terms of its sophistication. What is expected of him in grieving for his son? He shows similarities to the Queen's experience as he laments that the gods made him a king, but also a man. He realizes that his role is very much symbolic and that he might as well be made of stone or wood. Just as Queen Elizabeth comes to understand that despite her opinions, it is expected that she comfort her people. Hence, the needs of the society dictate how their leader must react, and that, despite wanting to be merely human, leaders are burdened with the image that they present to their people. And so the reason why I'm excited to show you this paragraph today is because most of the time when I write these sample paragraphs and put them up here on YouTube, the most common structure that I take is to talk about how the texts are similar, and then by the end of the paragraph talk about where they differ. And here I've done it a little bit differently, and I like the fact that I can show you that because there's no rule book about which way you must write a paragraph. And rather, what happens in this paragraph is it talks about the differences within, but then comes back to talk about both of them share this. And that's completely fine, because by the time I finish reading this paragraph, I've got ideas and analysis about both of the texts. I've got a range of characters, a range of evidence that I've brought up. I've got some really deep thinking about the idea of leadership, and I've got some comparisons in the way in which I've been able to talk about the different ideas and the different aspects of leadership that the characters from either text show and the different messages that they get towards, whilst also showing a higher conceptual understanding of exactly what both the texts are getting at when it comes to examining the idea of a leader. So guys, I hope you've really enjoyed that paragraph. I hope you've got something from it. I'll include a copy of it in the description to the video. If you've got something out of the video, like, comment, subscribe to the channel, you know, all of those things. We'd really appreciate the support. I hope that your studying is going really well for you. And until we see you next time, all the best and good luck.